Alfred Edmond Jr., Senior Vice President and Executive Editor-at-Large at Black Enterprise.
Yeah! Hey, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the meal that was prepared for you. I know I did. Now let's get right to the final discussion of the summit. We are the solution, leading Black boys and young men from at-risk to success. This is a very important session because we want to put a period that says what we're doing here is not just for us here. Each of us needs to go back and pour into brothers, including those who are at risk right now, but we know they can be saved. As was said earlier, we need to save ourselves, and the men in this room have to be a big part of that. The road to success in corporate America and beyond can be very hard to find, with many obstacles, hazards, and difficult transitions for Black males. But we Black men in leadership can play a critical role in helping at-risk youth and young adults gain the role models, the resources, the connections, the relationships needed to navigate the pitfalls and achieve their potential. Fittingly, this is a necessary conversation that I sincerely hope will resonate far beyond this present moment in this particular room. Thanks to Walmart, who was a big partner in pulling this session together. More applause to Walmart. We've assembled a panel of experts to lead us in a discussion on what one company, namely Walmart, is doing to make a difference and how we and the companies we all work for can learn from and replicate its positive impact. So let's welcome our panel. The CEO and Managing Director of Pronghorn, Jomaree Pinkard. Founder of the Confess Project, L&J Empowerment, Inc., Lorenzo P. Lewis. And Head of Marketing for Walmart, Torarie Durden. And our moderator, the Managing Director of Values Partnerships, Nicholas Wiggins. Come on, guys, let's do it.
Well, good afternoon. Oh, we can do better than that. Good afternoon. I am Nicholas Wiggins, and it's such a pleasure to be here. Let's thank Black Enterprise for giving us a space to connect every year at Black Men XCEL. We have an awesome panel of experts here to discuss this topic of We Are the Solution, leading Black boys and young men from at-risk to success. But I wanted to talk a little bit about my background and why this is so important to me. I am the Managing Director of Values Partnerships. We are proud to say that we are one of the country's largest 100% Black-owned social impact agencies. And what that means is we take many of the projects that you have in the room and we connect them to key stakeholders in the community so that we can have meaningful impact. Prior to that, I was at the NAACP, so I did my nonprofit side. But my favorite job was in the classroom, where I spent 7 years teaching Black and Latinx boys history. And I wish I could have stayed there until I met with my financial planner. But that's another conversation for another time. One that we do need to have, though, pay teachers. And so, the overarching question here is, and I'll ask each of you, is really, what do you feel is the main issue that we should be sort of zeroing in on as we try to find solutions to creating pathways for Black boys to be successful? Adam, go ahead.
Well, I feel like there's a myriad of different things we could think about. Hope my microphone is coming up. But the work that I'm doing is specifically around mental health for young Black men and for Black men in general. And I know mental health, particularly.
Right here.
Sorry about that. How that relates to the work that I do is the work that I've been doing for the last 7 years now have been focused on young Black men and now even women, particularly around mental health in barbershops and beauty salons. And what I feel like one thing that I've learned while doing this work now across 52 cities is that we truly have to have great listeners. I think at the simplest foundation, part of the work that we do is tied around teaching them how to be great active listeners and how to communicate. And a lot of times we alienate these very simple tools, which can become a greater issue around interpersonal community violence, domestic violence, et cetera, et cetera. And so I feel that when we just activate things that we know that works for everybody, right? And I feel like that can make a great difference.
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
I mean, well said. I think a lot of things that we think about when we're growing up are, we're not cognizant that we are. I mean, I think in this room, let me take a step back. First of all, thank you all for being here. I know it's after lunch on the way out, so give ourselves a round of applause just for being here in community. My name is Jomaree. I'm from New York City, and what that means to me was I was around a lot of youth at the same time because, you know, it's buildings on top of buildings on top of buildings, which means there's a lot of community, but there's a lot of people doing a lot of different things at the same time, and you can get caught in different directions. And so I think what was fortunate for me, and I think something I think we just need to make sure is that we're always providing a toolkit and the tools for the youth to understand that there are access points, right? A lot of what I do every day is solve for access. And the access points are different for different community members, different stakeholders, different pathways. The question is, are the access points or the toolkits being developed? Are they available, and do people know that? I think a lot about our community and our youth and the way that big brands think about consumers. We intersect our consumers during their natural behaviors. And then we intersect them with messaging, tools, and communications that actually change their behaviors and change their trajectory. And I think we just need to be very, very mindful and thoughtful about that same process that we use in selling products, services, ideas, messaging to talk to our own youth about the toolkits. And so how do we intercept and intersect our youth in terms of building the tools and the access points during their natural behavior? A lot of times we want them to do a certain thing. We want them to listen to Bob Marley. We want them to listen to the shit we listen to. Excuse my French. But they already moved on. They're listening to the new, cooler, whatever version that we think is old school, right? Or new school. And we're just not intersecting them in their new toolkit, right? So how do we do that? And I think that's something I think we need to do collectively as a community, nationally, regionally, and most importantly, locally.
Yes. Torarie?
Yeah, I think, hi, I'm Torarie. I think, first of all, we got to kind of stop talking at them and talk to them. Like, we were laughing in the back, like, am I old now, right? And I think the marker if you're old now is if you hear current music, do you say, man, I don't know what that is. You're old, right? But if you're old, do you talk to young people? Do you engage with them, or you kind of lecture to them? You kind of wag your finger at them. Now, think about it for yourself. Do you really want to listen to anybody wagging their finger at you? Right? So one has been a little bit of a disconnect in our communication patterns, to your point. But the other part about it is, you know, young men, particularly young Black boys, like, I think they want some basic stuff. And can you include that in your interaction with them? I mean, they want dignity, they want respect, right? They want high earning. So I'm proud, like, shameless Walmart plug here, we're the largest employer in the US. Anybody remember your first job? Remember how that made you feel when you had a job? When you start employing young Black boys in jobs, they start to feel better, right? It helps reduce real challenges that they're dealing with money in their pocket. Because the other part about my life is, like, I remember being broke. And being broke is not fun. And you tend to act out when you're broke, right? And you may do bad things. And so the other thing that I think we have to do is think about what is the recovery process for young boys, particularly who may do something and get off the rails. Have we created that platform to get them back, right? We don't want them to go down that path.
Absolutely.
Stay down it.
Activism, access, employment, toolkits. I hear all of these things, all of these great things that we can talk about. A lot of that happens through this overarching word that we use called mentorship. But one of the questions I have for each of you is sort of how do we reinforce the opportunity for black men to mentor informally? So we join Big Brothers, or we do all of these things where we feel like we have to, over 100 black men, we have to join an organization to be a mentor. But how do we create those spaces to foster the organic, informal mentoring that we really need in our communities?
Well, that's a really good question for me. I think about church. Right? I think about church as something that comes to mind. But also I think about, at the most linear version, again, like a lot of the work that I've committed ourselves in has been black barbershops across the United States. There is every socioeconomic group that you could imagine that goes inside of a barbershop, from principals to our homeless neighbors to the single mothers to grandmothers. And that in itself is probably the most general and most simplest way of mentorship. And so that is something that we've made ourselves committed to because of that as well. And obviously, we think about our schools as well. Obviously, that's obviously another great pathway. But I feel like that's we don't have to make it complicated. I think we just have to think about how do we want to be reached and what does that really look like for us. And I feel like we could, also just reimagine and be innovative about how we offer mentorship instead of, feeling like we have to become a part of an organization. Again, nothing against that, but I think we can do that in so many ways, to offer in our community. So,
Turn to your neighbor and say, it doesn't have to be complicated.
There you go. Yeah.
Any of you else want to share?
Yeah, start where you are. Most of you work 8-10 hours a day. Is there a young black person, or some of y'all 12, 14, maybe 3, 4, whatever wherever you're working, there's a young, probably black male or black female in your office that could probably deserve a conversation, right? And then what do you do when you're outside of that? If you to your faith, your church, your sports. I mean, we're it's not complicated to strike up a conversation with one and learn about what is needed from them, and then give them your actual phone number and tell them to text you when they have a question, right? And if we start doing that, we actually kind of rebuild that neighborhood concept that I grew up with, many other people grew up with, where everybody was pouring into you, and it felt like people cared about who you were. And if we could probably start there, that's like the most basic, I think, that we can start with.
Good point. I think, the local, I think, is the most important, right? Like
right.
The hand-to-hand, man-to-man is the most important. But I think I also would love, and I've done this in my prior work with the NFL years ago, was almost challenge the corporations, challenge your corporate sponsors to not only show up in amazing charity events and things like that, but can they pull up to the school and do a financial literacy course? Right? Can we use our leverage and our buying power to ask for more education and tool building and toolkits for our youth, to intersect them where they are? They're already at school. We already know that Walmart may pull up in the organization, but can they teach them a brand building class, a budget class, right? Are there other carve-outs that we can challenge our corporate sponsors to do that are local to that community? And like I said, I built some programs at the NFL way back in the days, 15 or so years ago, where we actually did that, right? It was like, okay, let's get banking partner X, let's get CPG partner Y to actually come a little bit closer and use football as the carrot, right? And draw them both close together for the things that we know they need that they probably can't foresee today. And I think we need to do the local, but again, the national plays and the regional are just as important collectively to build that bridge.
Yes, absolutely. So I have a special guest in the room today. I posted on LinkedIn and social media that I would be here for Black Men XCEL, and my former student hit me up and said, hey, this sounds like a great opportunity. Can I come and hear you at the luncheon. And so Devon Carmichael, he's sitting over there at the Walmart table, came down to Florida to experience Black Men Excel. The question behind this is, how do we create space for those who admire and want to seek mentorship, to have those opportunities? What advice would you give the younger men in the room on how to walk up to a Jomaree Pinkard or a Torarie Durden and ask, about the opportunities for mentorship?
I think I keep it short, but the first thing that comes to mind is being genuine and really being yourself. I think that I just take myself for example, someone who was formerly incarcerated and went through different challenges in my youth. I didn't feel empowered to do the work that I do now. But then I had to go back and think about the hard labor that my aunt and uncle did, raising me and being able to instill values. And so I utilize those values, regardless of my past, to help do mentorship now in my work. And so irregardless of kind of the different things that we may have faced or not feeling like we're good enough, I think a lot of it just really starts with being genuine, having the right intention, I think can really take us a long way.
Anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah, I think for me, we got to just take a step back and remember being 19, 20, 25. Right? Again, being old again, we were having a debate about young athletes and how they were crazy with their money and stuff like that. And I was like, look, if I was 22 and you gave me $10 million, that would not have been a good idea, right? So I think one of the things we can do is become a little bit more personable. Like the suits are intimidating sometimes if you don't have a suit, right? Or the business meeting is intimidating until you went to a few of them, right? Or the corporate conversation. So we may have to, or I suggest we also go ahead and grab them by the hand and pull them in for their first exposure and help them get ready so that it's more comfortable so they can feel it with the next one. And I think that's maybe get the ball rolling a bit. So.
I love that. I mean, we call it one of my buddies calls it the big homie energy.
Yeah.
Right? It's that other energy that you need to offer them in your vulnerable state, so that they know you relate to them, right? To your point, the suit can be intimidating, or whatever the position may be intimidating, but the vulnerability is natural. That's real. That's authentic. We can all communicate in that language. So how do you take off that cape and say, I was 19, and I didn't know my ass from my elbow either, right? How do we naturally do that and give them that game? I think is like part one, but part two is allowing them to understand that there's a trade, right? There's an intrinsic trade of my mentoring you for you increasing value.
There you go.
Your value and my value. How do you teach them that, like, you're never going to be able to duplicate this process unless you're able to offer value, and your value is your actual own story, right? Your pathway, wherever it is, 18, 25, 27, actually has value for others. And so how can you share your value so that I can extract it and vice versa? That's the trade. We got to be very vulnerable to let them know we didn't get to these places without that trade happening for mentor or mentee relationships. It's not that someone just offered me their hand and said, come on this journey with me. There was something happening along the way that they were learning from me and my experience and vice versa. And we got to just make that very explicit to each other that that's what's really going on, right? And that's okay. Yeah. It's okay to use each other, but it's not okay to misuse each other.
That's right.
Right? So let's really let people know that that's how we move together. We have to leverage each other's skills and understandings and vulnerabilities to get from point A to point B. And if we do that in collective, again, locally, hand to hand, I think it becomes much easier. And this is room, to me, is probably a showcase of that coming to life. Right? We all have that, I think, in common. And the folks that are not in the room or that are not invited or that don't have access to it probably just don't have that piece.
Yes. Yep. In about 10 minutes, we are going to give you an opportunity to ask questions of the panel. So start to think about your questions. Mm-hmm. You talked about your value is your story, and I think I want to dive a little bit deeper into some of the great stories we have on this stage. And I'd love to start with you, Lorenzo. So we talked about mentorship, but one of the things in this conversation that we also need to talk about is mental health. And one of the remarkable things that you're doing is pairing the mental health conversation with the barbershop. So I'd love for you to talk about a little bit more about what you're doing with the Confess Project, and really about how the barbershop serves as that safe space to have critical conversations.
So, I think at the most linear version, when I was younger, I went to my aunt's beauty salon as a kid. I hated it because I wanted to play video games every day after school, right? I did not want to go inside the beauty shop and listen to women gossip and men argue about sports, And so, but during that experience, I met my first mentor, a guy named Sylvester, and to this day, we still have a very close relationship. I lost my mom and dad biologically at an early age, and so I was raised by my aunt and uncle. So Sylvester gave me a few things. He gave me a father figure that I needed in my life. He also just served as just a great man that was just at that time he was grooming hair and cutting hair back in the early 90s. And so I just think about that relationship. That relationship has turned into a national movement where we're training barbers and hairstylists to be mental health advocates. Very simple. We're training them how to be great listeners, how to communicate, how to validate one another, and how to reduce stigma. And this has been evaluated by Harvard University because this modality is really teaching them when they're cutting hair for 30 to 45 minutes on how to use these skills. And in fact, we've seen this work to help barbers have been able to help someone from taking their life that has sat inside the chair and say, hey, I don't want to live any longer. Right, and so these skills are helping to help save lives, and so that's a greater part of the work that we're doing, and how it also extends to mentorship, because young men, in most cases, will see their barber for years, decades. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of men in women there has been going to the same barber stylist for years, and so that is their therapist in retrospect. So, thank you.
Absolutely, and I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, to your point about values, right, and being young and like trying to figure out what they are. I'm gonna give you a quick 2-second story. One of my love languages and my values are food and beverage. I love it. I love food. I love beverage. I love how it's made. I love the process. I love eating, clearly, and so. That led me to my actual journey. I built a brand called Hella Bitters, which is all the kind of 3/4 of a cocktail, everything that's not the spirit, put it in your drink. There's a company called Hella Bitters. Now I run an impact fund called Pronghorn, and we invest in black-owned spirit companies and the talent alongside to attract them to the industry. So this is an amazing movement that I feel like I'm a part of. But for me, it goes back to the values. Food and beverage is my love language. The value set that I was taught at home was to share what you know and empower others. Those were the things that I was given as a kid. So when I'm talking about the values that are valuable when you're 18 and 19, they're given to you a long time ago and long before your career journey. The question is, can you match those values with the thing you do every day? Once you do that, when people say you wake up and you don't feel like you're doing a job, it's because those things match. Right, and so I implore everyone to think about, especially the youth, to think about, am I living out the values that I was taught that actually are the battery in my back organically? Is that what I'm living out or not? And I think that's something that we can teach to youth, that it's not about always spreadsheets and this and that, which, be clear, the math has to make sense, right? It has to be math-based and hard-led, but the values that you learn when you're young are the things you're trying to map out on your blueprint along the way.
And a lot of those values we learned sitting in the barbershop, waiting forever for the barber that we always go to. We're not going to the front chair, nobody's going to the first chair, and listening to those conversations. Now, Torarie, Walmart is supporting the Confess Project in a big way. So I want you to talk about that, because it's important that we acknowledge when corporations step up to support what we're trying to do collectively as a community.
Yeah, I've been in Walmart for about 2+ years, and I was shocked when I joined, right? Because when you go into a store, you think about buying milk, bread, cheese, but all those things. So one of my roles at Walmart is to lead something called Walmart Business, right? Which is our new initiative to help small businesses, entrepreneurs, nonprofits save time, money, and hassle in their work. We're already focused on you at home, now we're worried about focus on your work. So one of the things I learned at Walmart was I didn't have to reinvent every great thing I wanted to do. There were people already doing amazing stuff. Like our Center for Racial Equity that was really thinking about reentry programs for previously incarcerated, or grant programs we were doing to help nonprofits as they upskill or up themselves in their communities, or partnerships like here where we're already working with great properties like Black Enterprise and other groups that's really thinking about being at the forefront of groups that have been potentially underserved before, but now needed, not only say help, but needed an extra leg moving forward. So we built Walmart Business to really go off and take advantage in a positive way of the work that the business was already doing and maybe give more entry points. So I like to say this, I'm from a super small town in South Georgia, 8,000 people, and you got to count the chickens and the cows and all that stuff to get to that number. But everybody in my family were either one form of a hustler, right? Now, I'm probably the only person in this room who's got hustlers in their family, right? But some were hustling, some people were making barbecue sandwiches, you know, for the football game. Some were doing other types of hustling that may have gotten them into trouble. So one of the things that is very important to me is as we think about expanding the small businesses, entrepreneurs, we got to do things, it's kind of make it personal for me, right? We got to do things that make sure that group of people that are in my family, I know not any of yours, right? But as they try to pursue their dreams, can we be an advocate for that? And all of you who are in business roles, can you turn your activism into stuff you can do at work, right? Can you connect the dots? And that's often a hard thing, but it's actually important for us to consider.
And that translates into, you know, the significant resources that Walmart's been able to provide for the Confess Project. I don't know if you wanted to share a little bit, because I think it's great.
Yeah.
Well, I'm an Arkansas kid, and growing up in Little Rock, Walmart has always been in our backyard. I'm sure in a lot of you all's backyard, but it's very near and dear to me for someone who comes from Arkansas. And so recently, entered a partnership with Walmart this past spring for a $450,000 grant to continue to support our work, but also now support young men between the ages of 14 and 21 who could become in contact with the justice system. And so utilizing those barbers as mentors to support those young men and to see that we can decrease them from even going into the vicious cycle of incarceration. And so really grateful for that opportunity. And
I was about to say, that was a clapping moment. I was waiting for the clap.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations on receiving that grant and the amazing work that you do. He's also an author. I'm halfway through Jumping Over Life's Hurdles and Staying in the Race. I can't wait to finish it, so make sure you grab that book. Torarie, I got to go back to you with a question that ties to this. So we are 3.5 years post the murder of George Floyd, and we sit here and we see that corporations maybe reached about 20% of their commitments that they made in the aftermath of what happened. What do we have to say or remind corporations to make black boys thriving a priority?
Yeah, I think I have 2 sons, and I grew up in South Georgia where we still fly Confederate flags for my route home. So the traumatic incidents of George Floyd galvanized a lot of people around this topic that some people deal with every single day of their lives, right? And we had this influx of giving and support and programs that everyone rallied around. But companies, like other things, need help, because after that excitement or energy of giving money, you start to realize that the problem is a bit more systematic, right? It's kind of occurring every day. So one of the things that I think we all can do is find new ways of getting excited, not excited, that's not the right word, getting energized about taking at-risk young boys to another level. That's one of the reasons why I started the role I have. That's one of the reasons why the traditional ways of just giving to a cause aren't probably enough. The traditional partners who stood up and took money may not have had the scalability to go and take that money and do things. I'll tell you a dirty secret, the companies didn't want to not give away more money. You have to have willing, trusted, executable partners on the other side to go do something with it. So one of the things I've been thinking a lot about is how do we upskill the organizations who are in this fight on a regular basis so they can scale and replicate that effort, so there's more opportunities to get money, so there's more opportunities to get behind their efforts versus these flashpoint moments that do send a signal, but we need to build sustainability and scalability around. So.
Absolutely. So we're getting towards the question and answer phase, so please line up if you have a question at either mic in the ballroom. While we're waiting for questions, Jomaree, I wanted to go to you. So you're at an impact fund, but your impact fund is currently dealing with the spirits industry. And we see that that's been an industry where we have been a primary consumer, a major consumer. How do we transition to being the decision makers about how things happen in that industry?
It's a great question, and I think what we're trying to do is build a template, a model, right? To your point, we consume, but a lot of times we think DEI or charitable donations or thinking about the youth is actually, we think it's charity.
Yeah.
So the question we have to ask ourselves is, how do we start to change our thesis, our framework from charity to actually this is profitable business building, right? The community that we're trying to serve in general is underrepresented. We actually are an investment. We're an investment. I'm gonna say that again. We are an investment. We haven't been served before. We're actually left off to the side. We go and shop and buy because we need, not because we want, but we're on the side. And so how do we change the framework of corporate partners that think through underrepresentation and access to that underrepresentation and providing toolkits to that underrepresentation as actually investment early on, right? And so what we do over at Pronghorn is something simple. We built a model that feels like a social impact fund where we attract talent to the industry and we fund entrepreneurs through actual capital, access to knowledge, talent, et cetera. But the business model is that the sustainability comes in the way of the businesses being sustainable because we will support our own businesses. We will buy the products themselves and reinforce the business case for this kind of like social good being good for business, right? And so the business model itself, the investment thesis needs to change itself so that the underlying asset, us, actually gets paid to do the work and to consume our own products or goods or services. Yeah. Now, it's fine if you consume others, but make sure that we're leveraging our community, our trillions of dollars of buying power to directionally provide more access for all so that when we're trying to do a mental health play, we're trying to do something in the community, it's actually, it's thought through commercially, right? Because the lens right now is like, that's nice. That's cool. Thank you for doing that. No. Right. Don't thank you for doing that. You need to do that just like you need to provide that commercial, just like you need to run that radio ad. This is part of the ecosystem that we're trying to change. Yes. And so Pronghorn is actually trying to build a template to do that first, to copy and paste along any industry at any point. And we're giving away the blueprint, if you will, for free. We want others to copy and paste this idea of take money, put it into entrepreneurs, build mentorship programs, build all these access points so that the system is bigger and that we get our pro rata percentage of the pie.
Absolutely. And I wanted you to share that because to Younger Men Room, there are all sorts of different pathways to success here. And that's one that we wouldn't traditionally, think about. So thank you for sharing. Okay, we have a question over here. And I'm going to preface question. Everyone say question. Question. Give me your name, where you're from, and then your question.
Okay. Get mad at me. Gerald Moore, I'm the founder of Mission Fulfilled 2030, where we create technology and STEM programs for at-risk boys. My question would be directed for, I believe your name is Torian?
Torarie.
Torarie. Yeah. Torarie. So
it's a lot of extra letters.
Right. My apologies. But definitely a great conversation that needs to be had. But you mentioned we need to figure out ways to scale organizations that do this work. Yeah. And I do this work, and I wanted to put out there that in doing this work, I left a 22-year career as a management consultant and cybersecurity engineer to reach back to impact Black boys. And what I've experienced in this time is that the biggest investor in my organization is, number one, white women, white men, Black women, and fourthly, Black men. We need to switch that situation. So looking at this room today, how do you think we engage more Black men that are in influential positions to invest in Black boys, because we're not doing it?
Okay. I answer that. And so you say you're going to be, I disagree. I think Black men are investing in Black boys every day, all day, and in different areas than maybe where you are driving. I'm a former physicist and electrical engineer. I just remember being in graduate school at Georgia Tech, and there weren't a lot of black men in the room in engineering with me, so if there was only 3, may not have had a lot of capacity. But what I will answer your question differently is, like, we need more access to you. I know it sounds weird, right? And everybody has their passion project, right? But find out where I can layer into you in a way that's mutually beneficial, and I will help you, right? And that's anyone. But if you ask me to do something that I'm not equipped to, that I don't have capacity for, that I have no knowledge of, and just say help, it'll be a bad match, right? So when you said that, I'm like, man, I'm a member of NSBE, National Society of Black Engineers. I'm a member, I was in the Engineering Association of the World. I want to make sure you connect to those types of groups who also have real resources in that space, so we're matching. And I say that because I work at Walmart. And you will be a little bit surprised at sometimes the things that people ask us to go and get a part of that have very little to do with what we do on a daily basis, right? That's not a knock. I like to make better matching, right? And I think that'll help you have a more fruitful conversation with black men who want to connect with you because they have common shared interests. And then there'll be some of us who just got to volunteer anyway, right?
Well, and give us your website real quick so we'll all look it up.
Yeah.
Missionfulfilled2030.org, just how it's spelled.
2030.org.
And Mission Fulfilled has acquired our first building, the Mission Fulfilled Technology and Innovation Center for Black Boys, which will open in Rochester, New York. And it's in the John Lewis building.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
So I would
Congratulations
love to
on
connect
that.
with you gentlemen, and let's invest in young black males.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that. Question on this side.
What's going on, y'all? Frank E. Brady, educator, founder of Free Game for Life. We work with young people, it's what we do. The question I have for you all is, what is one tangible resource that we can all walk away from this to give to a young black male? It could be a book, it could be a website, a program that you recommend, because with young black males, you need a hook to grab them so they can see the future right now, right? So what's one tangible resource that y'all all recommend that we can put in our little toolbox to engage them?
I got 2 for you, but they're both internship programs. I'm a product of an Inroads internship program, so that's what it is, right? Like those. So I got Inroads for you, and another one called XCEL, another black institution funded by Robert Smith. I think they have thousands and thousands of interns that they've scaled to the point about scalability in less than 5 years, which is incredible. So those are 2 toolkits that, again, for me, intersected in the moment that I wanted to be in the business world. My mom was spiraling out. I was 18 years old. I was like, where? And high school was like, there's a few programs. We don't have that many black people here, but anyway, those are 2 for you that I think are sensational, wonderful, and been around for a long time that completely, clearly do the work.
Yeah. Education was my gatekeeper out of South Georgia poverty and all that stuff. I was good in basketball, but I was way better in math. So I would say there's a list of, I can't remember the name of the book, so I'm going to try to find it before we leave, of all the scholarships afforded to young blacks, particularly in the STEM fields. Because I think if we don't start actually telling them a way to apply, I'd say go to college or go get out of the thing, they don't get there. So that's one. The other one, I'll be feeling kind of funny on this, but like my success model growing up was Dwayne Wayne from A Different World, right? And so I think what we see and what we hear, I would tell young boys, make sure your role models look like something you actually want to be. And I think if we don't start doing that, they'll never actually try to be like that. So.
I think for me, and it's obviously what we've been talking about today, is was helpful for me during my challenges and even just growing up was mentorship programs. I mean, I think that, there's tons of mentorship programs, but again, going back to what Torarie said, is that finding that right program. Like I have a lot of mothers that reach out to us all the time about how do I help my young men with this, and again, I'm very critical about making sure that you're asking the right questions, making sure that you're being really detailed about what your needs are, because every program is not for every young man. And so I think we gotta ask the hard questions, and also, ask what those men capabilities are, because some of those men, again, it's just they may not can reach some of your demand that may be needed for those young men. So that's
One more thing I'll say is, you said it earlier, we should all have at least one person that we text, that we talk to.
That's right.
Just one. that we actually do that, that we do that like every week too, right? And make sure that they know that they're there, that we're here. I think that's easy. And I just want to make sure that everyone knows that Frankie Brady right there is the one that gave me that terminology, big homie energy. He's been doing this work for many, many, many years. Make sure you get the flowers, my friend.
And we'll have our last question over here. Thank you for that. But I'll add too, because you know I'm a former educator. Beyond the Mayflower, have someone read Beyond the Mayflower, because people need to know their history. When they get a little older, have them read some Audre Lorde, because when you can read about the plight of the black woman and understand her journey, it inspires you to be a better black man. So.
Gentlemen, salute. This has been a great discussion. My name is Janice Greer from Travelers, based out of Connecticut. This question is for Lorenzo, a fellow gamer. Let's go. I appreciate what you are doing in terms of the barbershops and connecting that with mental health. In Connecticut, I can definitely think of numerous communities that could benefit from that. So the question for you is, how do you identify potential barbers that you are able to kind of partner with so that they can be a part of that great training to be able to have those discussions that can help change our communities in many ways?
That's a good question. So, you know, back when we first started, it just used to be who knew what barber, right? But then we learned really fast when we started thinking about sustainability and involvement, engagement. I want to be honest, barbers and stylists have a job. Like, a lot of them are economically trying to scale up and take care of their families. Barbering industry is one of the first industries they can start to grow generational wealth, because they can potentially own their building, and it's just, you know, just so many different revenue streams that they can sustain. So I think I think the biggest answer to this is, what is the sustainability of that barber? Are they a barber owner? We potentially target barber school owners as well. If they own a school, if they own a barber shop, there's a greater sense of responsibility there. A lot of barbers, unfortunately, are not, all of them are not responsible. Like, you know, just like a lot of people are not responsible. Okay. And so finding those really, we're partnering with the state of Delaware, where we're rolling this out as a license, but we're partnering with specific barber owners who will be master trainers. And so they'll go out and train other barbers across the state. So that's just a good example. It's really finding the right barbers. What I've also seen has been best is those barbers stylists who have mentorship, or they're already giving back. Right. It's a lot of particularly shops that are not giving back. They're harder to engage. They don't really see the long-term vision of it, so they won't follow through. We do follow-up calls. They won't come to the calls. Like, it's just a myriad of things that start to happen. So hopefully that kind of gives some. Just really, I think it's really the person, and where are they in their life at that point? So.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. So we're wrapping up here, so I want to give each of you...
One more?
Oh. Okay, go ahead.
So this is really a question looking for some help. So first, I agree with you. Black men are doing so, because my chapter, 100 Black Men, started 5 public schools in New York City, and the founding principal is now the chancellor of that school system, the largest in the world. So black men are pouring. It's called the Eagle Academy. Look it up. But my question is really more of a challenge. So I have a business that has 5,000, will have 5,000 employees that I'm a partner in. 60% of them are black and brown kids. And with just a swig of a pen, the governor of Illinois made it possible for me to make it 80%. And the reason is that 20% were ex-felons. They were young men with records. And we own a casino, and it's a licensed business, as many licensed businesses lock those brothers out that are high paying. My salary started $50,000 with full benefits and tuition reimbursement. Now I can hire them in non-gaming positions. So my question is, how do we go and get governmental figures to change the laws that allow professions that require licensing to be accessible to them?
Good.
Happy to take a stab at it.
A little outside of my zone, but I'll try. So I used to work in gaming and licensing, and I think that the power of the pen is very important, but the power of the pocket is also super important. So your ability to organize other groups who have a stated mission and be able to speak to politicians around that would be the first step. You need to go in mass, not in singles. in that regard. Second thing, make sure that the economic impact that you're able to say it is or it isn't, because that actually does move the prioritization of laws up to the forefront. And I think the third thing is the repeatability and scale. One example does not make the data point to draw a new law, but you do need to show a level of pattern recognition that should be in place. I applaud the effort. I think that's great. I think that's something you should get other people around and be loud and proud of the work you're doing. But as you start trying to work on the whole law system, it kind of takes an army approach versus an individual data point approach to actually move the needle. And the other thing I would say, which is common knowledge, is you got to find one great advocate in wherever you are that needs to hear, see, and experience that story that you're trying to deliver. And I think that'll actually help move you down the path. So that's my free, non-educated feedback about how I would do that if it was me. So.
Yeah, and the reason I chuckled was because, Alfred, that's a whole panel next year, Black Men XCEL. So we need to pinpoint that one. Okay, well, I want to give you an opportunity to give some closing thoughts here, and if you could phrase them around the idea of we're all going to leave Black Men XCEL, we're all going to go home, we're going to think about these 2 days, 3 days of wonderful conversations that we've had, but when we start to think about how we're going to act, specifically on the topic of, you know, making sure that black boys and young men thrive, what are some actionable things that we should be doing?
Got that mic? You got that mic? I mean, I think some of the things that I've heard over the week have been around this idea, which is true, that we are our ancestors' wildest dreams, right? And I think that for me sits in a space which means that we are also the vessel, right? And we are the vessel for something I think that is that this idea that our ancestors really didn't have a lot of choice in the matter. They hoped and toiled for the chance to do better. And I think we all, collectively sit here with a slightly different mindset in the terms that we have to recognize that we are driving on our choice to do something. And that kind of allowance, if you will, is something that I want to make sure that we all kind of understand that difference of where we actually sit in this moment of privilege to a certain extent to provide and pay it forward to others. So for me, the idea is really around being a mentor, being accessible, being vulnerable, and understanding and really embodying this idea that we are choosing to have a mentor, to not have one, to not play on this idea of chance for the most part. Of course, there are those that is still the case, right? But I think for most people in the room, we have the choice. And I just want to make sure that we capture that as a frame of reference as we move through the rest of our careers.
Yeah, I'll try. Probably keep it to three things that I try to hold dear to me. One, see yourself in them. If you can't see yourself in them kids, like, you're not really respecting them, right? You're not. Right? So find something in them that looks like something in you. Second thing is, this has been great, but I think we should tell our stories a little bit more, right? Like I told you about me, I'm from a small town, I'm a physicist by training, I'm an engineer by education, I'm in marketing now. Now that young person has heard something that they can latch on to, right? And it's, you know, whether it's my love of Outkast or whether my love of LeBron over Kobe, whatever. Like, you have to start talking a little bit more so that they can have something they can latch on to, I feel, right? Because right now we're distancing ourselves from them, right? I say, and the third thing, remember that they have basic needs like food, water, clothing, like, you know, job security, dignity, respect. So their fight is for that first, and if you can help them get one of those things, then the rest start opening up. But it's basic needs that they're fighting for, and that's why they're at risk. They don't have those basic things, so you got to feed them first before you ask them to go run a mile. So,
yeah, there's an African proverb that says, "When a child does not feel warmth from the village, they will burn it down." And I was once that child.
Oh, say that again. Say it again.
Yeah.
When a child does not feel warmth from the village, they will burn it down. And I was once that child. I was incarcerated at 17 as a juvenile. Family members had went through a lot of different challenges. Everything you can think of, it happened. But I go back to when I talked about my mentor, Sylvester, and he wasn't just the only mentor. There was a few others as well, and I was able to go to college a few years after my release. But the one thing is that they listen. And I think that that's really important, is that we listen and we tend to the needs of young black boys, that you are seeking to try to support. And I feel like that's and I say listen from a place of not also over talking them, because we are adults. And I think that a lot of the young people we work with now is that they're mostly trying to express more, and it turns into a greater tangent because they don't feel heard. So they just want to destroy everything. And I used to be that young person, so I get it, So and even when I was in juvenile, I remember most of the kids that I was in there with, they didn't feel heard, they didn't feel loved. And so that's why most of them were repeat offenders, and they went back and forth. So it's just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Well, let's thank this phenomenal panel that Black Men XCEL has put together. We appreciate each of you, and thank you for being a wonderful audience and listening to this conversation, and let's get it done.
Thank you.
All right.
That's great, man.
All right, brothers, let's give another round of applause to this dynamic panel, Jomaree, Lorenzo, Torarie, and Nicholas. And listen, I want to remind the young brothers, the young leaders of excellence who are between the ages of 19 and 35. At 3:15, you want to meet us in the King Ballroom for a special networking meet and greet session just for you. So we want to really celebrate the fact that you're here. Meet us in the King Ballroom 1 and 2 at 3:15. And before we depart, one last time in the BMX Showcase and Lounge, please welcome to the stage our CEO, Black Enterprise CEO, Earl Butch Graves, Jr.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to say, did you enjoy the last session? Very important. And I'm all that stands in between yourself and getting into the expo. But I wanted to thank all of you. And I know that the room has thinned out a little bit as people have gone onto the expo. I guess they're serving pork over there again. But I want to thank all of you for attending the Black Men XCEL Summit. I want you to know that we're going to make this bigger and better next year. We'll have twice as many people. And we're going to make this event become like the Women in Power Summit for black men. And I want to make sure that you do the same. Remember, next year when you come, don't just come by yourself. Come next year and bring somebody with you. All right, and let's make this as impactful as possible. God bless you all. I hope you enjoyed the 2023 event, and we'll be back here in 2024. Good night.